Thank you very much, and it's nice to be back here with y'all. 0%. Zero. That's what the latest presidential poll put out by California State University shows for the Libertarian Party presidential candidate for 2024. Zero. That's even less than the 1.1% we got 3 years ago. It's even less than the 1% in the Wall Street Journal poll of just a couple of months ago. Zero. It's actually got a zero next to the Libertarian Party. This is what happens to a party that for 20 years has abandoned its principles, its founding principles, in favor of welfare, warfare, state reform, and Republican light in the efforts to garner votes. And I got a confession to make to everybody in this room. I'm with 100%. I've been with 100% for 20 years. This is a bad message that this party has adopted, especially for a party that says it stands for liberty and calls itself the party of principle. You know, ironically, the same thing happened to our nation. There were some bad founding principles of this country, like slavery, but there were some good ones. No income tax, IRS, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, Federal Reserve, paper money, national security state, foreign wars, drug wars, gun control. And 20th century Americans abandoned those founding principles in favor of the welfare, warfare, state way of life. And it's been a disaster that we're paying the price for today. The welfare state has created a mindset of hopeless dependency, including right here in this party, and including among our presidential candidates. The warfare state, Martin Luther King pointed out, is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. Nobody can deny that. Invasions, occupations, sanctions, embargoes, assassinations, drug war, immigration controls, death and suffering is everywhere. And we're paying the price. $34 trillion in debt, $80 trillion owed to Social Security and Medicare recipients, monetary debauchery decade after decade as the Federal Reserve printed the money to pay for this status nonsense, and we're paying the price. And the price for the abandonment of principle in this party, our founding principles, is 0%. Zero. It actually has a zero in the poll next to the Libertarian Party. Social Security and Medicare. It is now, for 20 years, it's been an accepted fact in this party that this party's got to save Social Security and Medicare. It's a principle now. Every presidential candidate in this race, with the exception of one, stands for the continuation of these two socialist programs. Without exception, the crown jewels of American socialism. In the South Carolina debate, every one of them, my opponents in this race, took me to task. They said that I lack compassion because I want to dismantle these programs immediately. Because you see, for me, freedom is not reforming welfare. Freedom for me is the dismantling of every single infringement on freedom, including socialism. And my opponents in this race at that South Carolina debate said, Jacob, you lack compassion. You see what this insidious philosophy of socialism does to people, including libertarians? It makes us convinced that we're expressing compassion through the continuation of a socialist program that is based on the initiation of force through the coercive apparatus of the IRS, one of the most tyrannical agencies in U.S. history. That's not genuine charity. Genuine charity is what comes from the willing heart of the individual. They said there at that South Carolina debate, and ever since, they said, we need an off-ramp, Jacob. We need an off-ramp. We need to continue this program, Social Security, for the next 25 years, for at least one generation. Because they said people will be dying in the streets if we abolish it today. They said this party's got to stand for the continuation of socialism. Nonsense. This country lived without socialism for more than 100 years, and nobody was dying in the streets. Freedom brings out the best in mankind. There was more voluntary charity than mankind has ever seen when Americans lived without socialism. But this is what this party has stood for 20 years, especially in our presidential campaigns. The need to let Republicans know that we stand with them on the continuation of this socialist program. And Medicare as well, which destroyed the finest healthcare system in history. And my opponents say we have to continue it and just settle for health savings accounts or direct medical care or some other socialist reform measure. School vouchers. School vouchers, which my opponents in this race favor. Why not? If you did a survey of LP members in this party, I would say easily 80% would favor school vouchers. Came in from the Republican Party. The LNC sends out fundraising letters advocating vouchers. They actually get speakers at LNC fundraising events promoting vouchers. This is nothing more than a socialist educational reform vehicle. It's based on the initiation of force through taxation, like Social Security and Medicare, that takes money from one group of people to fund the education of another group of people, just like government public schooling does. Or, even worse, there are candidates in this race that are not being forthright with you. Throughout these debates, they have said that they favor localism. They want to get libertarians elected to school boards across America to show Americans that libertarians can run these socialist institutions better than Democrats and Republicans. They call it localism, or states' rights, or state sovereignty, or nullification. There is only one principled stand, and that's get government out of education entirely and reject all these socialist reform vehicles. Now, let's take immigration control system. Everybody knows in this party that now the dominant sentiment is in favor of this system, immigration controls. All of my opponents favor this system. All of them. There's varying degrees. At the far right-wing spectrum, they mimic Trump and DeSantis. Seal the border. Finish the Berlin Wall with eminent domain stealing. Militarize the border. And over here, there's the others that are like Biden. We need inspection stations and controls, Jacob, but let in more immigrants. Immigrants are good, and my grandparents were immigrants, Jacob. But when you hear the word let, that's not freedom. That's control. This is a system that is based on the core socialist principle of central planning, which, as Ludwig von Mises pointed out, brings planned chaos, which is what we've had on the border for 80 years. Along with death, suffering, kidnapping, rapes, highway checkpoints, a Berlin Wall, warrantless searches, and now concertina wire, designed to cut people up. This is an evil and malevolent system. But for 20 years, the trend in this party has moved toward the support of this system, toward the Republican position. And I would have noted the platform has not changed. It still favors open borders, completely open borders. Abolish the Border Patrol, abolish the Immigration Service. Get rid of that Berlin Wall. Free movements of goods, services, and people across borders. But there is no question, I've gone from convention to convention to convention. The sentiment is toward the right wing to support this evil and malevolent system. Where do we go from here? Well, we can do it again. We can keep doing what we've been doing for 20 years and run these kind of campaigns. Fine. 0%, zero. You see, my objection is not the zero. It's that this message is not freedom. I'm in this for freedom. That's why I'm in this race, and that's why I'm in this movement. That's why I left the law practice to go into this movement. I want to live the life of a free man in my lifetime, and a 25-year plan for Social Security ending doesn't interest me at my age. I want freedom now. And we can run the same kind of race if y'all want to, and get your 0% and 1% and you're real happy. That's not good enough for me, because 1%, 0% is not going to get me my freedom. The only thing that's going to get me my freedom is a 10 to 15% breakout in the polls. And there are those in this party that say that's impossible, Jacob, and they've given up. And they've settled for giving us a warmed over serfdom with their reform Republican light message. 20 years ago, I ran for U.S. Senate right here in Virginia against John Warner, one of the most popular governors in the history of this state. He was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I knew I wouldn't get one Republican vote, and I didn't care. Because unlike the reformers and the Republican lights in this party, I don't target Republicans for votes. The Democrats didn't run anybody because they knew they couldn't win, but I knew I wouldn't get any Democrat votes either. And I didn't care about that either. I mean, I'm calling for ending Social Security, Medicare, open borders, abolishing public schooling. No Democrat was going to vote for me. They all defaulted to the LaRouche candidate in the race. I didn't have a dime. But I had something different. I had a message of liberty, a message of principle. And my enemies in this party at that time, the reformers, the Republican lights, were mocking and ridiculing me because they were convinced I was going to get 0.01 or 0.02 or even 0%. Zero, like in that poll right now, 0%. And they were stunned into silence when I ended up with 7% of the statewide vote. I didn't say 0.07, I said 7% of the statewide vote. Because there's a constituency out there that will vote for liberty and our package of principles if we give them our principles, but they will never vote for immigration reform, Social Security reform, educational reform, or any of this other reform thing that has come to characterize this party and define this party for 20 years. One of the proudest moments in that race is when I walked into the office of John O. Peterson, pastor of the Alfred Street Baptist Church right there in Alexandria. He was later elected to the African American Hall of Fame. And he didn't know me from Adam, but he agreed to meet with me. And I said, Pastor Peterson, this is what I stand for. Open borders. It's horrible what we're doing down there to people. And he's a minister. He understands this. And I said, the drug wars, the most racist government program since segregation. The welfare state has been devastating for blacks. And at the end of our conversation, he looked at me and said, he knew I couldn't win. He said, Mr. Hornberger, I'm endorsing your candidacy, and I want you to take this letter of endorsement to every black minister in the state. And I did that, and those are my voters. Those are my voters. There's no doubt in my mind that 106,000 people that went to the polls to vote, not for me, but for this message of liberty, were blacks. I also went to Hispanics and the Hispanic press, and I said, look what they're doing, the death and the suffering they're inflicting on the people of the border. And I've seen it firsthand because I lived 30 years of my life on the border. And I have no doubts that a large portion of my votes came from there too. We can run the same kind of campaign if y'all want to. Same thing we've been doing for 20 years. I don't fault my opponents for taking these reform positions. They're going with the flow. They understand that this is what it takes to win a nomination. But I'm telling you that if we're going to lead America to freedom, and the restoration of the good founding principles of this nation, we've got to start right here and restore the sound founding principles of this party. And that's what I want to do. I want to run a race of pure principle for the party of principle. Open borders, abolish Social Security, Medicare immediately, separate health care in the state, education in the state, money in the state, economy in the state. Legalize all drugs and make that case to the American people. I want us to go into this battle fighting as libertarians, not as reformers and not as Republican lights. Our weapons are our assets. I want to go into battle against the people who have destroyed our freedom and prosperity in this country. And I want to seize the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.